Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. I'm happy to welcome you all back down here. It is great to have you. I remain as yet untouched by plague. However, allergy season is upon us, so I apologize for, well, my overall puffier sort of appearance. Although, then again, I'm regularly unkempt anyway. So, let's go ahead and just keep cracking on along here with today's subject, and that is simplicity in storytelling. Why do we want simplicity in storytelling? Well, to put it simply, a more complex story does not necessarily mean it's going to be a good one. Complexity doesn't really it doesn't necessarily add a whole lot to the story, or at least it doesn't guarantee that the story will be better as a result of its complexity. A complicated story can be engaging and enthralling, to be certain, but you have to make everything fit. Think about Lost, how famously complicated that was, how many other little things and details and elements were thrown into the story, and then it just ended up going frickin' nowhere. And it's just absolutely frustrating. And the way it ended is just terrible. Same thing for Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was wonderfully complex and had this really, really intricate story involving so many different families, so many different characters, and that's what made it complex was the interplay between so many different characters and the impact they had on the political framework, how they tried to survive within that framework and within the society that had come about, especially after Robert Baratheon's death. I mean, the way everything just flared up between the Starks and the Lannisters, and everything just kept escalating. That complexity was great, but then when it came time to end it, the writers D&D, who, by the way, it should be mentioned, I forget which one of them it was, but one of them had their hands in that stupid Wolverine Origins movie where they made the brilliant decision to have Deadpool's mouth sewn shut and give him so many different powers. I mean, if that doesn't tell you what shitty writers they are, nothing will. I mean, hopefully Game of Thrones got that point across, but god damn, they're awful. Anyways, a complex story does not guarantee a good story, and you have to be able to handle and keep everything together and track so much more. It can be rewarding, but it's a great deal more hard work for you. And sometimes a simple story is best, and that a simple story can have tremendous impact and tremendous weight behind it. And to emphasize this, I want to cite one of the greatest examples of a simple story being so incredible, and that's Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series, not the M. Night Shyamalan movie. That was a fucking travesty. But The Last Airbender, the animated series, was absolutely incredible. I mean, not that there weren't some episodes that weren't duds. There were a couple here and there, but as one of my favorite YouTubers pointed out, because it was episodic in nature, they could leave behind storylines that didn't really go anywhere, or just kind of push them off to the side and then focus on new things. Because every single story could be wrapped up within one episode, or at most one or two episodes. You had shorter story arcs contained within the larger story, and the larger story is about as simple as it can get. What's the goal? Stop the Fire Nation. Aang has to learn all four elements, gain mastery over them, and then stop the Fire Nation. The only real caveat and twist to it all is that there's a time limit. And the time limit is they have to stop the Fire Nation before Sozin's comet arrives. If they do, all the firebenders will be empowered by the comet, and they'll just absolutely dominate. And they're already dangerously close to winning the war. I mean, they've conquered deeply into the Earth Kingdom. They're assaulting and sieging Bossing Se, the capital city for the Earth Kingdom, regularly. And Bossing Se already almost fell at one point. But That's the only real twist there. There's a time limit towards stopping the Fire Nation and restoring balance. And in order to stop them, the Avatar Aang has to master all four elements. That's pretty frigging simple. Good guys go stop the generic fascist. They go stop the generic warmonger. And really, the villain doesn't have to be all that complicated. The villain is just the goal, the end point, the culmination of everything. And really, the villain doesn't have to be present because, as I mentioned before, your big bad, especially for this kind of a narrative, is as much characterized by what his or her or its underlings are doing. We see throughout Avatar: The Last Airbender the way the Fire Nation just completely runs roughshod over everything because they believe they're superior. They believe fire's the superior element. And you hear this rhetoric repeated constantly by Commander Zhao and then Admiral Zhao once he gets promoted. He bangs on and on about fire being the superior element and how they're going to dominate and conquer. And it reflects that this is the guy that's getting promoted and that wise, calm, and ultimately peaceful characters like Iroh are shunted off to the side and disfavored. That tells you everything right there, all you need to know about the Fire Nation and its leadership during the course of The Last Airbender. It's militaristic, it's warlike, they are not settling for anything other than total victory. And we see these other elements keep cropping up, especially after Princess Azula shows up. That psychotic bundle of crazy. Whew. But that simplicity in storytelling allows for all this to happen. And the fact that this is the backdrop, this is the larger goal, allows them to have all these smaller and shorter narratives. And that can easily and should be brought to our own game sessions. There's nothing wrong with a simple story. And you can have this larger overarching story. And that can be simple. But then you have all these other shorter self-contained stories within it. And those help to make your world feel alive. The larger goal can be stopping this warlike nation. But then along the way to that goal, they have all these other different interactions. They help this blacksmith that's forging arms and armor for them. They help him improve his forge over time, doing little quests here and there, retrieving this legendary hammer, gathering these coals from the elemental plane of earth, and then binding a fire elemental into the forge so that this smith can produce these legendary armaments for them. It still requires that they gather other special materials like mithril, adamantium, other rare ores from other planes. But with just having a better forge, the smith can make money and they see their impact on this local area, especially this local economy, if they're frequenting one place over and over. Or say they help the smith another way and they build a mobile forge for him, a cart that has a larger space on the inside going full TARDIS with it, and then they build this legendary forge within it. That is a smaller, shorter story, or at least a series of smaller, shorter stories, and helping one NPC where you can just get this variety of quests out of it, these different missions, and then by helping one NPC over and over, they interact, they build this relationship, they have this bond, and it just makes this world feel that much more alive. And it's all the more possible by having simple stories. Complications can be fun. They can be incredible and add layers of depth and complexity as the players navigate all these different characters with their motivations, parts of different factions, possibly even turning NPCs against the factions that they're in. That can add so much, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the story will be better. And prime example of this, again, Lily Orchard. I'll post a link to her YouTube channel down in the comments below, or the not the comments, the description down below. But she talks about Legend of Korra, deals with infinitely more complex topics than just stopping the generic fascist. But the story doesn't come out all that well because there's so many plot points that they have to track and tie up, all these different loose ends and elements that need to come together to a satisfying conclusion, and more often than not they miss. I mean, the best example of storytelling that they have is in the second season at the start of it, when there's a civil war brewing between the Northern Water Tribe and the Southern Water Tribe. And that falls apart halfway through once they ditch it and just go with the stupid chest lasers and hit it with a bigger laser beam kind of styled fights. I mean, there's already a video on this again by Lily Orchard, but it didn't make for a good story. They had this complicated plot and they were doing great with it. And if they had just gone forward with that and kept after it, maybe it would have been good. But then they discarded it all because, like, no, we better just go off and do this other thing now. And it just didn't work. They just immediately shifted gears towards the origins of the Avatar, which, that could be an interesting story, but it wasn't a story that needed to be told right in the middle of this other story. It was a completely separate story that didn't. It was supposed to add more, but it really didn't. It didn't fit, and that juxtaposition against good writing against bad writing. I could talk myself in circles around this. Point is, a complicated plot does not guarantee a better story. You have so much more work to do to bind these elements together and get them to go forward towards that good conclusion. And that can be incredibly hard to do, especially in a tabletop game like this where it's a collaborative story effort. And your players are going to notice flaws in the story. And in some cases, they may take advantage of them. I know I've done this several times. But my larger point is for today, a simple story is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be an incredible thing, as we see with Avatar: The Last Airbender. You can get a lot of mileage out of simple concepts and simple plot points. The complication complications should add to the story, and you should build a bit more slowly with complications. Throwing a crap ton of things on the players right off the bat, that can muddy the waters and muddle things quite a bit. Start off simple. Start off simple, let them get a grounding, let them be familiar with the area, let them start building those relationships and build that familiarity, that trust, that liking or disliking. And then, after they have these relationships established, these relationships start to spider out into other things through other groups and other factions. Different NPCs start to butt heads, whether directly or indirectly, and then the players are put into a position where they have to choose. And that having to choose adds complication in and of itself. But I'm could talk in circles further here, but I think you get the idea pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here for now. And by the way, if you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and go down there and maybe click like, or even leave comments down below. Even if you didn't like it, click the dislike button. Let me know in the comments below what you think I messed up on, or if you have your own thoughts and opinions to throw into the ring. I'm more than happy to discuss it with you all. And if you've been enjoying content so far, maybe consider going over here and clicking on some of these other videos that'll be popping up soon. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so much for your time. Have yourselves a good night. Oh, and like and subscribe. I think. Do what you want.